I'm Jon Najarian. My brother Pete Najarian will be joining me shortly, and we're going to discuss China up and U.S. down. We'll tell you why and what we make of it right after this on The Rebel's Egg. Bang! Welcome back, folks. Again, we are here at SIBO Global Markets in Chicago. And Pete, on the other hand, is up there where the sun doesn't shine as much. And that's why he looks like pasty white versus a nice tan John. But we're going to have to rush a little bit, folks, because we had some technical difficulties. So we're going to dive right into Macro Minute, Pete.
Yep.
Let's talk about the China rally, a less severe decline in industrial profits for October. That's one of the things that I was focused on as a positive for China because it wasn't as bad as they thought it could be.
I'm looking at the PCE, John. It came in line. That's something that we've watched for a very long period of time because the Fed told us basically to watch it. But it's interesting because I'm looking at what the Fed's, at least what the CME tool is telling us about what the Fed's going to do. About a month ago, John, it was at 75%. They're going to cut a quarter point. That's going to happen. A day ago, it was 59%. Today, 69%. So I'd say that they're starting to move a little bit closer again to that. Yeah, that quarter point cut is getting a lot closer as we get closer to December as well.
Thank goodness, Pete, because we need it. But we don't need half-point cuts and semi-panic like they did back in September. I agree. All right, Pete, let's talk about fantastic futures. Coffee is going to be mine today because Arabica beans jumped to the highest level since 1977. They were up almost 3% today, Pete, to $3.17 a pound. This is the sixth straight daily increase, and man, a drought in Brazil and so forth is a big driver for coffee having a lower yield. And you know what supply and demand means, Pete. You have less supply, demand stays the same, prices are going up.
They're going up, and they are going fast. Keep an eye on what happens over there with the Starbucks of the world and everybody else. Those prices might start jumping. And oh, by the way, they never seem to cut them when the price comes back down. Anyway, next up, we've got the 10-year, John. I think when you look at the 10-year, back in July, it was 445. Not too many, weeks ago, we were looking at 245. Where are we right now? 423. Gives you a little bit of an idea. It's very volatile, but it's also been dropping fairly significantly. And I think you want to keep a really close eye on this 10-year because that's going to be very telling in terms of the market itself.
No doubt, Pete. And I'm going to say that we're also paying pretty close attention to a stock that is just getting trashed today. It is a warehouse automation stock called Symbotic. And Pete and I have talked about this one before for good and bad. But this time, this is a Walmart-backed company, folks. And, Walmart invested in them because, hey, warehouse automation. We need stuff moved in and out fast, and these guys are supposed to be able to do it really well. Well, apparently, tragedy struck, Pete. And it's not working out so well for Symbotic. They're going to have to redo their numbers. Does that sound something like SMCI, Pete? Well, if it does, Super Microcomputer fell from over 100 a share all the way down to 17. I'm not saying Symbotic goes the exact same way, Pete, and nobody like Hindenburg has accused them of the same sort of things Hindenburg accused Super Micro of, but this ain't good.
This is not good. You talk about some economics and the accounting errors that are going on here, John. It's really pretty scary, to be honest with you. And they also added, as they've been going through this whole thing and the stock down 38%. I mean, that's a pretty big hit. It's actually been down even further than that. But you look at the 52-week low and high, it's sniffing around pretty close to those lows. But in any case, John, I think this one's pretty interesting because they also had to give their outlook for 2025, adding that they're going to be cutting that back as well. There's just a lot of problems. This one for me would be a no touch. I think SMCI was a little bit different. This one, it's just pretty scary, and I don't think you need to feel like you can buy the absolute bottom. I would wait and be very comfortable waiting to see what exactly they're able to produce. And that outlook that's negative, that's not so great either.
Yeah, and just to your point, Pete, they it's not at the same level that Supermicro was at. By that I mean, first they get accused, then they say maybe we're going to have to restate numbers, then they say, hey, we just lost our accountant, we got to get a new one, and so forth to do our audits. This one's much earlier in that, so we'll have to see, because I hope they don't have similar issues, but if they do, this one is going to get cut in half even from here. Mm-hmm. All right, Dell Computer, Pete, known as Dell Technologies now, DELL. Mostly in line with expectations and guidance, but a little bit weaker than expected, Pete. And for that reason, this one was down double digits in the pre, and it hasn't made a dramatic recovery.
It hasn't, John, but this is one of those names where, okay, they're punishing it pretty big. I can understand why. There's a lot of different things going on here. Their AI exposure is bigger than probably people think. They've had some really great growth. But you're right. All you've got to do is miss by just a little bit, and things start to look a little bit like they're going south, and that's exactly what happened today. Now, this one's different. I look at where they are from a PE perspective. I look at what they're doing in the AI space. I don't know, John. I think this is one that if I see any kind of unusual options activity, I certainly am very interested in potentially jumping on it, just because of where Dell is right now, what the valuation looks like, and the potential growth into the future. I realize that they missed a little bit on that revenue or the sales, but I think this is one of those names that when it turns, I think this thing could turn in a hurry to the upside.
Well, I would be patient, but I think they're probably going to do pretty well from Black Friday into the Christmas holiday, Pete.
Yep.
Let's talk about Urban Outfitters. Record net income and sales for their Q3. And of course, that doesn't include what's going on basically from November through the end of the year here, which should be pretty good as well. But this one, wow, the stock jumping to a 4-month high right at the open. What about this one? Would you stick with it, or would you say maybe it's time to lighten up a little?
You know, the interesting part is, John, I was taking a look at it, even where it is right now today, and you look at the PE, the price to earnings, it's about a 10. So I don't know, John. I think they've found something. They've been able to get their product out there in a much different way. People are pretty excited. A lot of price targets are being changed because of this. It's pushing not too far off of that the 52-week highs. I like everything about what they were able to produce, and I think that they probably can continue to do this in the following quarters. I wouldn't be surprised if this name establishes a new 52-week high in the not too distant future and pushes it up something north of 50. I like everything about this report. There really wasn't anything that's a flaw. So because of that, yeah, I like this one, and I like it now, and want to ride on that little bit of momentum they've got going to the upside.
Well, let's switch gears, Pete, and talk about IREN. Now, it's a Bitcoin miner. That should tell you almost everything you need to know, folks, because what do Bitcoin miners do? Well, they prove out a formula, and then they participate in some of the Bitcoin that is generated each day for the miners. They're doing work, and this is a reward to those miners. They get a part of a Bitcoin. It's not like just one person or one miner wins everything. It's basically based on your computing power, how many rigs do you have, and all the rest. And of course, proving out that formula for Bitcoin on the blockchain. Well, this one rebounds dramatically, Pete. And yes, we had unusual activity. Look at that big jump from $9.50 or thereabout, jumping up into the $12 range. Now, think of a $90 stock going to $120, folks. Because a 27% jump, they were buying the February calls. But as you guys know, Pete and I buy the at the money call. We don't buy those way out of the money February 16s. If anything, you're buying the February 10s because that's where the stock was. Take a look at where that went today, and you'll understand why trading options makes a lot of sense, right, Pete?
It does. You better be disciplined too, because you just never know what could happen after this. We've already watched this huge run up in this pullback that we'd seen in Bitcoin, and now another bounce to the upside, John. I think it's going to continue to be volatile, although I think, like you, it's probably there's still some pretty good, strong bulls out there that continue to want to see this stock higher into the future. And because of that, this one really could be a name that really runs to the upside. But when you've got option activity like we were seeing, I think that's something like you said, you got to get to the at the monies. You want to get a lot more delta to what you're looking at. And I think on top of that, you better be disciplined to take some of it off, if not everything, and then wait for the next opportunity. But they've got data centers, they've got the mining. They really do kind of cover it all. Because of that, it makes for a really interesting stock where the balance sheet is pretty good. They do have a cash burn, but I like what we see here, John. I think there is more upside. As long as Bitcoin's got upside, I think this name has upside as well.
Well, good advice as always. And I like the upside of these miners, folks. You take a look at how, for instance, some of the Bitcoin related stocks, they're going to move lockstep with Bitcoin. And my prediction is Bitcoin nearly doubles, nearly hits 200,000 within the next 18 months. That's my prediction now with a crypto-friendly administration coming in. All right, Pete. I know it's Turkey Day, and you and I want to wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving before we get into sports. And one of the ways we can do that is remind everybody that they can get a great discount for our Black Friday specials for the March 22nd Rebelcon out in Las Vegas. It's going to be at the MGM Grand, folks. We're going to be out there with Grant Cardone and a whole bunch of our trading partners. It's going to be fabulous. The 20th and 21st, it's going to be Grant with 7,000 or 8,000 people in the auditorium. And yes, Pete and I will be on stage there. But then we go over to a slightly smaller venue where maybe it's only 700 or 800 people for our Rebelcon 2025. And if you scan that QR code, well, you guys will get a discount, our Black Friday special. All right, Pete. Thanks for getting that up there, Jared. Let's talk, Pete, about your Red Zone Sports. What do you want to hit?
Yeah, let's start off with the Kansas City Chiefs. For whatever reason this year, John, they're 10-1, but for whatever reason, everybody seems to think these Chiefs aren't all that good. They're like, well, they're just not winning the way they usually win and all the rest of that. And I would say this. First of all, I completely disagree. I think they might be a better Kansas City team now than they have been in the previous years. And I think that's why it's going to lead them probably back to the Super Bowl once again. Now, the ball can always bounce in a lot of different ways. But, John, how about if I told you this? They didn't just have like a weak schedule like many of the teams that are out there, and I'd throw the Minnesota Vikings in that category. When you look back and you see what their wins have been, John, they're a 9-2 football team. That's great. And they've been playing, very, very good. They've been able to close out. But they have struggled with a lot of the teams that they have beaten, and a lot of those teams that they've beaten are teams that have already been beaten by a lot of other people. On the other hand, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Ravens, they beat them. The Bengals, they beat them. The Falcons, which, you can look at them however you want, but it's a pretty good football team. And when Kirk Cousins is healthy and throwing the ball around there, they're a pretty damn good football team. The Chargers, good team. Buccaneers, their record's not great, but I'll tell you what, I watch Baker Mayfield every week, and he just gets a little bit better and a little bit better. But here's the reason why I think the Kansas City Chiefs are worth keeping an eye on, John, as far as who's going to come from the AFC. Their defense. They are number 9 in points allowed. They're number 4 in total yards. They're number 3 in rushing yards, and they got a top 10 offense. I would say they have put together a great package. All you've got to do is look over at the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens, their offense is outstanding. Derrick Henry, King Henry, definitely one of the best backs in all of football, right? Great quarterback. He's probably the MVP again. So they've got it on offense. This is not the Ravens of the past on defense, John. They're giving up points, and they're giving up a lot of points. So they don't have what Kansas City has, which is phenomenal offense, great defense. They can put that together. That's a team that probably gets themselves right back in the Super Bowl. Do you agree, or do you agree with the other folks that think, you know what, Kansas City's just not as good this year as they've been?
I think they really improved with the wide receiver at speed, Pete.
Yeah.
And a speed wide receiver, you've heard it before from many people, but you can't defense speed. It doesn't matter. I mean, you can double them up. It's still not the same. You've got to get them a bump on the line, and then the second guy's got to get over there and get on top of them, because otherwise they're going to run right by you. If you let those wideouts with that much speed, and we're talking about some of the fastest guys to ever play pro football.
Ever.
I think that's a game changer for Mahomes to have that. As good as Tyreek the Streak was and still is, he's playing down in Miami. This guy is a pretty decent replacement for him. And by the way, they still have great running back, and Travis Kelce might be paying more attention to Taylor Swift than he is to his stats this year, but he's still pretty decent at tight end. He might not be at his all-pro level, Pete, but he's pretty damn good still.
Yeah.
I would say Buffalo, and then, believe it or not, Pete, I would go all the way down to the Chargers. Like you said, Jim Harbaugh has just totally changed that culture, and that's one of the things that lets you win in the playoffs. So I'd say Buffalo and the Chargers, the LA Chargers, could make a run at Kansas City.
I don't disagree. I like the Chargers a lot. I think they had a couple of mistakes this past week when they played against the Ravens, against his brother, and they had a couple of long runs, more than one long run. And that got kind of, that turned things around in a hurry. But I like the Chargers a lot. I think that they are still young. They're still learning, and they're going to be competitive. But Kansas City, man, oh, man, they just put it together. All right, the college football playoff, John. Now, this one's right in your backyard, because I wanted to ask you about this. So we know who the general teams are probably going to be right now. Really close, but it's not finished. We still got room. There's a lot of games that are still to be played, and some of them are going to be starting tomorrow, and they're going to go through the weekend. But here's one for you. Being a Tulane kind of a guy, they're 9-2, good football team. They had 2 losses early. They lost to K-State. They lost to Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma is a team that just got done putting the wood to Alabama. So Oklahoma's not so bad. Their record's not great, but they got a lot of talent. But Tulane, John, I'll give you this. You've got some ballers on that offense for sure. Your quarterback is 66% completions, 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. You got a running back with 1,200 yards, 5.5 carry, 15 touchdowns. And by the way, your tight end's got 6 touchdowns. Anytime I see a quarterback that's thrown to the tight end, it makes me like that quarterback a lot better, because it means he's pretty damn smart. They're always open. You and I know that as linebackers. Does Tulane have a legit shot, and will they get into the playoff, in your opinion?
If this was 5 years ago, Pete, I'd say no. They're just playing patsies. But Tulane, as you and I know, has made the bowls the last several years. They knocked off USC, shocked the world with that. And then they get in there and they beat Utah. I mean, this is a damn good coach and coaching staff, Pete. So I'm going to be going down to Tulane next Tuesday, by the way. So I'll try to talk to the coach for you. But I'm teaching a class. I do it once a quarter on their quarter system. So I'm teaching a class on trading down there at Tulane on the Wednesday. Let me see. Is it Tuesday? Or maybe I'm teaching the class on Wednesday, but I go down there Tuesday. Anyway, you guys don't care about that. But what you do care about is this is a good football team. And they can beat a lot of the teams that are out there right now, because Pete's right. The quarterback does not just hand the ball off, not just run himself, and not just throw the ball to some speedy wide receiver. He actually scans the field, and he occasionally throws to the tight end, which, as Pete said, is something that not every quarterback, not every offense actually uses their tight ends. I'll tell you a place that doesn't, Pete, Notre Dame. I mean, how many Notre Dame tight ends are in pro football? A lot. But you know how many of them scored more than 2 touchdowns in a season? Probably 0. They don't throw the ball to the tight end. They just have them block. But there's some damn good tight ends that come out of Notre Dame. And unfortunately, the quarterback doesn't really look their way much. But this one at Tulane does look at that tight end, and that's a difference maker, Pete.
Last thing I'll say, John, is that I hate to break the news to you, but there's a potential that you might lose that coach at Tulane because North Carolina's firing their head coach, and they are looking right at Tulane right now. So we'll see what happens. Maybe he doesn't want the job. Maybe he does. But North Carolina is a damn good place to be a football coach. I can tell you that.
You bet. Well, from Pete and I, we'd like to wish all of you a very safe and happy Thanksgiving. I'll be up there at Pete's house. There's a Rebel turkey right there on the screen, Pete. That's an AI-generated Rebel turkey. And we hope you guys have a fabulous Thanksgiving, and we will be back for you next week, Monday. Enjoy and be safe.